There we go. Hello, folks. Let me take off the, here we go. How's everybody doing? Good to see some familiar names there in the chat. I see Jordan's on. How's it going, Jordan? And we got Charles. Olaf from the Eastern Shore. Good to see you, Charles. Confed Yank, as always. Man, it's really good to see everybody here. I can't wait. If any of you all are able to make it for the Owners Rally, it would be an absolute blast. Gary. Hey, Gary. How's it going? I know you'll be there. Craig, how are you? Good to see you again. Multifarious, as always. Confed Yank says, I just realized my profile pic is still in Michigan. Huh. I can barely see it on my little screen here, but so I couldn't tell anyway. How's everyone doing? If you haven't already, tell us where you're signing in from. And let's see, why is my chat screen not working? Let's see. Maybe it just takes time. There it goes. Now it's working. I hope y'all can see that. There we go. It's a little hard to read against the, make it a little bigger. How about that? Against the new background. We'll see how we like it. Maybe I'll put a white area behind that or something. Good. Okay, anyway, good to see you all. And I've got an interesting agenda program for this evening. I hope you all enjoy it. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, let me know what everybody's drinking. I love that sound. I am drinking same thing I was last week. We got a nice supply of it from a generous customer from Middle Ages from the Syracuse Pale Ale, an SPA. Middle Ages is the name of the brewery. I take it. Looks like it's small. Brewed and canned by Middle Ages Brewing Company, Syracuse, New York. There you have it. Cheers, everyone. All right. Oh boy, we got lots more comments here. Let me see if I can pull. I am running a little bit behind here, so I'm going to pull up the Whoop. We're going to move that over here. Me and technology and I don't always get along very well. So, as you all know at this point. There we go. I'm going to pop out that window. And that way I can type things if I want to. Yeah. All right. Let's see. We got... It always seems like every time I open this window it is different. But anyway, we have some more comments I'll look at real quick before we move on. Confed Yank says, I'd be happy to be an owner by then. Great. Well, if you aren't yet, there's always time. So let us know. And if you have a bike on order, you're welcome because you're already an owner. Confed Yank, I just recall where I've taken it. Maybe your picture. Michael Trueblood. Hey, Michael, how are you? Good to see you. He's coming in from Pittsburgh. If y'all are active on the Owners Forum, the Facebook group, or the Owners Forum on the website, you'll know Mike. Gary says, I have tickets and hotel reservations for the Owners Rally. Awesome. I would be surprised if you weren't there. Confed Yank says, I got a driver's manual from North Carolina from 1927. Wow. They were already thinking about such practical things as driver's manuals in 1927. Craig says, from Tennessee, drinking coffee. Good choice. Gary, I changed it up this week. Dr. Pepper Zero. Nice. Confed Yank says, well, last week I tried Wright Brothers beer. Today I'm on some cheap Coke. Fantastic. All right. Oh wait, we got more people down here. David Hunter NYC. Would any of you at Janus buy a Vespa GTS 300 just because you could? I mean, I'm always game for another two-wheeled vehicle. Multifarious says, I'm in Nebraska eating some watermelon, which is almost a drink. Okay. Confetti says, Vespa is a solid choice. I looked into getting one, but something about budget for me. Hey, Grant's on. And Gary says, how is the 450 exhaust bracket coming? I had a pothole this week and broke my left side bracket. I'm sorry to hear that. The bracket is actually installed. We have the penultimate prototype on a bike. It looks fantastic. We actually were able to, I was whacking it with a hammer to see how much it would vibrate, and it looks really good. So, Gary, we will get you all set up and ready to go with that. What I'm going to do is, probably shouldn't be saying this too loud, but we're going to be doing a run of 10, like, what are we going to call this? First edition brackets for folks that have higher mileage, and we're going to send those out as soon as possible, and we'll get those out to you. If you've broken an exhaust, we will also take care of fixing or replacing that, depending on what makes the most sense in your application. So yes, please get a hold of us. The more information we have on how it broke, a photograph will help us determine what the best course of action is in terms of getting you back on the road and taken care of. I will say that unfortunately this is probably something that's going to happen to many 450s, so we're trying to get ahead of it as fast as we can and get this bracket out for you. It promises to be exactly what the doctor ordered. I don't know who the doctor is in that scenario, but okay, before we do any more, we're going to move on to a poem. Before then, Richard Gitz. So I'm seeing some new names on here. This is awesome. Welcome, everyone. If you haven't been on the Ramblestream, I guess I should say welcome to the Janus Motorcycles Random Stream, episode 11, with me, Richard Worsham. If you are down with the ramble, if you are ready to hear me blather for a while, welcome. If not, you can always switch the video to something else. But anyway, as always, I'm going to start with a poem. Try and not make them too long for those of you who are not as romantic. This one, if you are familiar with, if you like poetry, you probably know. Even if you don't, you may have memorized it or read it in high school. But I thought, I don't know what it says about my mood today, but this is a poem by William Butler Yeats called Sailing to Byzantium. Again, you may be familiar with it. It's one of my personal favorites of all time. That is no country for old men, the young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations, at their song, the salmon falls, the mackerel crowded seas, fish, flesh, or fowl, commend all summer long whatever is begotten, born, and dies. Caught in that sensual music, all neglect monuments of unaging intellect. An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. Nor is there singing school, but studying monuments of its own magnificence. And therefore I have sailed the seas, and come to the holy city, Byzantium. O sages standing in God's holy fire, as in the gold mosaic of a wall, come from the holy fire, purn in a gyre, and be the singing masters of my soul. Consume my heart away, sick with desire, and fastened to a dying animal, it knows not what it is, and gather me into the artifice of eternity. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such as form as Grecian goldsmiths make, of hammered gold and gold enameling, to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing, to lords and ladies of Byzantium, of what is past, or passing, or to come. It's also a pretty fitting poem for Janus, if you think about it. All right. What to next? Next up, I thought this evening we would do a little, I don't know what you'd call it, retrospective, a walk back in time to the very first thing that got Janus started, and take a look at the Paragon, which some of you may be familiar with, and how we got the idea for the Paragon and how we built it, and some of the story behind that. And what I did over the last month or so, I've spent some time with the power of Google Photos. You can go back and look at everything, and it has the date and the time and the place and all this information, and you can search it. And I basically created a catalog of all the pictures of the Paragon, and I'm not going to subject you to all of them because there are lots of them in the way it was made, but I kind of cherry-picked some good ones, and going all the way back to the very first inkling of a thought of it, and I thought we'd walk through that a little bit, and maybe in the coming weeks on the Ramblestream, we will do a similar thing with the Halcyon 50, which I think would be even more interesting to a lot of Janus folks. But this is sort of this is really genuinely where it all started. Before we had the idea for starting Janus, this was the kind of catalyst for building something from scratch. So we may jump around a little bit, but I'm just going to go straight from Google Photos, and it organizes it by date, so it's going to be chronological, and we're just going to talk a little bit about it, see how far we get, and I will try and stop a lot for questions, and we will go from there. Please, if you have questions, pop them up in the chat. I'll stop periodically. As a matter of fact, we'll do that now. Richard says, howdy, Las Vegas, checking in. Hot as 3 Hades, but riding fast before 8 a.m., saving to buy your 450. Wonderful. That's really great to hear. I bet it's hot out there in Las Vegas. I've seen some of the temperatures. Craig says, will the new builds have the new brakes installed? The new brakes. Are you talking about the exhaust bracket? Bracket. You must mean bracket. Yes, shortly, once we have them in production. So, yes, they will be. They are not yet. And so if you are ordering a bike and you've just received it, or you are about to receive it soon, it will not. But it's a very easy install, and it will go on. And we are working to get this as fast as we can to prevent you having any issues with your bike in the near future. So this is the hottest order we've done. I'm rushing this through as fast as I can to make sure that happens on time. Confetti Yank says, granted, watching these ramblings has me looking at more pocket watches. Oh, that's a good point. Watches. I had a lovely, I don't know if he's on yet. There he is. I see Seth. Right on time. Hey, Seth, how are you? That reminds me, I wanted to give a little shout out to Seth, because Seth and I think we spent half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour? I don't know. We spent a long time on the phone at the end of last week because I don't know if y'all caught in the chat 2 weeks ago when we did the watch talk, that he wanted to send me a watch to take apart, and he did. So I wanted to show y'all. This is a very interesting. I will not go into the full. Let's see if I can get it to focus. I will not go into the full details on the story. It's an amazing story on this watch. This watch itself is probably not worth a whole lot, although who knows? It does not run, but it's probably a prototype for this unique company in Pittsburgh, founded by a German national. It's actually etched on the back. Very interesting, but essentially worthless to Seth, and worth something to me because it will allow me to take it apart and mess around with it rather than I'm actually, I'm not wearing my analog watch today. My mechanical, I also have a digital watch, which I'm wearing today. But I usually wear it when I exercise, and so that's why I forgot to change it. But really, really cool. This company is called Kobold, Kobold. If you're interested, look it up. It's like what Seth says, a torrid story. Yes. Really wild story. Really cool. Thank you so much, Seth. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to losing some pieces. I hope not. Yes, pocket watches. Craig corrected. Yeah, I caught you there. Confed Yank says local buddies are finding more fun routes around here. Apparently, it's Janus rated. Interesting. Cool. What does that mean? Tell us what Janus rated means. Foxy. Heck yeah, man. Foxy is, if you all don't know, this is great. Good to see you, man. Foxy is from the YouTube channel Foxy, which he did a review on the Halcyon, well, all the bikes. I don't know, Fox, when did you do that? That was a year or more ago when you did your first video, which is a really honest kind of like video without actual, yeah, you did test ride some bikes. Anyway, he came back and test rode the 450 and the 250. Fantastic video. We had a lot of fun riding together, and it's good to see you on the channel. Welcome. Confed Yank says Frankenmuth is a good town for a visit. Locally brewed beer, nice scenery. I've been through there once. Seth, torrid story. It does run. It does run. Okay, well, I take that back. I know it runs. I couldn't get the hands to move. I can see the little, and I'm going to exhibit my ignorance, the escapement, the little escapement moving. But I will dig more into that. I haven't really had time to dig into it anymore. Screw down stem. Unscrew it and it will wind. Okay. Maybe it's I was expecting it to be to try and wind it with just the rotor in it. I will try that. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Oh, well, thank you. Confed Yank says, so I'm getting to work in Wilmington, and there's an awesome art store. And while mentioning other hobbies possible common among Janus owners, they had hand-bound books. Awesome. I thought also possibly taking a very scenic picture, putting it on canvas, and having it framed in wood. Charles says, has the agenda for the rally been released? Not yet. We are finalizing the agenda now. I think the actual final planning of all the events and details is underway, and it's in much better hands than it has been in the past. So I expect a really fantastic event. Foxy says the original was a few years ago during one of the Saturday Discovery events. Okay, it was a Discovery Day. So that Foxy's referencing what I was saying that first time he came for a video. Yeah, absolutely. Really great to see you anyway. And that second video, if you haven't watched it, is really great. And then, Foxy, I didn't catch it, but initially, but I also saw your uncut footage of riding the 450 where we catch the truck honking its horn at us, which I thought was fun. That's a really nice video, though. Confed Yank says, Janus rated, fun, twisty roads, especially narrow, with nice scenery to it. Fantastic. Foxy says, loved revisiting the bikes, had an amazing time, and the video has done very well for me. I hope it sent some purchases your way. I'm sure it has. So thank you very much. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because it's already 7:22, and I always do this. Keep talking. So I'm going to move. I guess I should have been using my big screen at this point, but I didn't. So we're going to go ahead and zoom over to the slideshow. Can you all see that? I think you should be able to. There we go. Okay. So, this is where it all started. I realize it may not be the most attractive bike that any of you all have seen, but this was my first custom build, complete with its giant dent in the tank. This is what I call the Pukovus. It's what I called the Pukovus, which was a joke on the, if y'all are familiar with the Triumph Norton mashup, which they called the Triton, which was a Norton featherbed frame and tank and bits with a Triumph engine. And they, because the frame was the best frame and the Triumph engine was the best engine, and folks would cobble these things together, shoehorn the engine into the frame in the late 50s and 60s, and that was, it's kind of like the ultimate cafe racer motorcycle. And they would actually paint on the tank Trident, or what was it? Triumph Norton Triton. Sorry, not Trident. Triton. And so this was my version of that, which is the Puch engine with the Batavus frame. Now the Batavus frame is not renowned for its handling, but it had a really cool looking fuel tank and lines on the bike. And the Puch engine is the most upgradable engine. Not the prettiest thing in the world, I admit now, that looking back on it, but my goal was to kind of recreate something that looked like a Norton Manx. It was fun. It has an 84cc Metra kit on it. So this started it off as 50cc, 84cc Metra kit. At this point, it has an Amel. I believe that was a 17 millimeter carburetor, and a Simonini. This is before Motion Left, which was Devin's old business, started making exhaust systems. So I bought the best exhaust that I could afford. It was like a $250 Italian exhaust, and it ran briefly before it seized. It seized a whole bunch of times, but I've never been the greatest mechanic in the world. I'm more interested in the aesthetics, but it was a lot of fun. Neat bike that I held together in some places with the bungee cord. So there you go. There it is in Richmond. That's my hometown. I took it back to Richmond and rode it around a good bit. At this point, it has I used a lot of different components on it. Obviously, didn't upgrade the exhaust bracket. There's a theme here with these exhaust brackets. Maybe you should try a bungee cord. At this point, it has a Dell'Orto PHBG 19 millimeter carburetor. Anyway, so that was my background. That's how I met Devin, who we founded Janus together. The two of us founded Janus. Was through these vintage mopeds and hopping them up. And I should have collected some images of the bikes that he put out through his shop. Really incredible. If you have time, I mean, see if you can Google MLM or Motion Left mopeds. They're mopeds. They were really just clean bikes. What I did not have in terms of my mechanical ability, Devin more than made up for with his. And that was kind of the pairing we brought to it. The Pukovus went through many different iterations. You can see we're starting to get somewhere now. We're getting a longer fuel tank, a saddle seat. I stretched the frame out, welded it back together again. It never really made it too much further past that. It was really a nice canvas to start with. But we were part of something called the Moped Army. And this is going to sound ridiculous to y'all, but it was a big thing. There still are gangs in all the major cities across the country. It actually was founded in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The Decepticons were the first moped gang or club. And we would gather for rallies. And that's really where I got the idea for the fun of riding. That's what got me into two wheels. It wasn't motorcycling or the idea of a leather jacket or any of that stuff. It was the idea of the fun of these things and just kind of having a blast, being able to work on it yourself. All the things that I think maybe tie together some of the aspects of what Janus has become. This is just an example of somebody's wacky, hopped up, variated, I'm not even sure what this bike is. Looks like an Italian, almost looks like it could be a Samadhi, but with a Hobbit engine, a Honda engine. Everybody was doing these things, hopping these bikes up. Here is a good friend of ours, Peter McDaniel, with his Honda PA52 with a MLM. This is by the time that Devin was making exhaust. This was I think that looks like a BK100, big old expansion chamber exhaust. This thing was probably a 65 mile an hour moped on what looks like 70cc kit. Variated. Pretty cool. A Benelli T50. What a cool motorcycle. And we would just get together for these rallies. You can see all the bikes in the background. I think I got a shot of more of these mopeds. This was an interesting brand called Brighton Bees. They were at the time, I think, North Carolina, and he was making these frames, or at least converting frames over to. This was a Pook frame with this tank. Pretty neat stuff. A Jawa. This is a guy named Julian, who we're talking like advanced level powder coat here. That's not paint. He does transition powder coat, which don't ask me how you do that. And I believe he's still doing that. He's running a fabrication business and doing like extremely high-end powder coat at this point. Really, really high-end. Here you go. That's a great shot of a moped rally. This is probably like 2009 down in Louisville or something. Yep. Another great bike. Look at that thing. Really, really neat. But anyway, I think everybody was sort of trying to channel the idea of the 50cc race bike. I mean, it's what you wanted to look like. And the 50cc race bikes were things like this. And I'm actually not sure what that is, if that's a Honda or if that's what kind of motorcycle that actually is. It might be a Kreidler. We'll get to more of those in a minute, but the essential idea of the 50cc was, I believe it's the first Grand Prize 50cc was in like 1960, 61 maybe, and they ran them through the early 80s. And this was really a product of the fact that it was fun to watch and it was affordable. And so it was a really neat way to get a lot of kind of post-war moped brands, and including brands like Ducati, which obviously by the 1960s had moved on from its moped heritage, but a lot of these smaller Italian brands were still manufacturing 50cc mopeds and all over Europe, and they wanted to race. And what happened is, over the course of a couple of years or of decades in this era, that's a Kreidler, I think. That's a Suzuki there. That first one was probably a Suzuki. A lot of these European brands, especially Italian brands, would race in the Grand Prix. And the key to these bikes was they were two-stroke and they had a lot of gears. And some of them were doing 80, 90 miles an hour on 50cc. They would eventually go on to go much, much faster than that. But here's a Riga water-cooled two-stroke 50cc. But as you can see, these bikes, I think the next picture is one of my favorites. Oh, there we go. Look at that thing. It's stripped down to the bare minimum. And you can see where we were trying to channel that with these mopeds, which was exactly what these were. They were glorified mopeds. Many of them did have a larger transmission than what modern street mopeds had, but beautiful, minimalist little motorcycles that were pared down to the very bare bones of what you needed, as you'll see in some of these pictures. But I did a little bit of clipping for you all of some of the brands that were the most famous. And this is one. This is an early Kreidler, and Kreidler was a Dutch moped brand that really would go on to be one of the most famous two-stroke 50cc GP bikes. I think it's called the Floret model. I don't know if they say it in there in Dutch, but their mopeds, they really figured out how to win at this GP racing. I thought this was a really interesting image because check out that front fork. I didn't actually realize that Kreidler did a leading link. Very interesting. They've got an extra stabilizer bar. I don't know if you can see where I'm highlighting there, above the horizontal. Pretty interesting. Look at how narrow that picture has not been clipped in half. That is the cockpit of one of these Kreidlers. Your hands are basically like this. That's how narrow they are. because everything was aerodynamics. Above, like 60 miles an hour, everything is aerodynamic. So you got to tuck down behind it. And the guys that were racing these were like jockeys. The lighter weight you are, the better. Two of the most famous, one for Kreidler was and I'm going to not pronounce his name, but Jan de Vries, very unusual Dutch name, and the Spanish rider who rode for the company called Derby, which we'll get to in a minute with our 50cc, was Ángel Nieto. I've talked a little bit about Ángel Nieto on the podcast with Junkie from Creative Riding. We talked a little bit about those bikes, and he's familiar with them. And I mentioned that there's the cockpit of a Derby. Look at that, a little bit wider than that Kreidler, but not much. Steering damper and all. But both these two racers would go on to be the kind of the leaders in of the pack. Honda would end up getting into 50cc racing with their, of course, 4-stroke technology. They didn't like the 2-strokes as much. They had a really hard time at first, but eventually with their RC 110, I think it was, which is a 50cc, they started off with 5 gears, they moved to 6, they went to 8, they went to 9, and I think they ended up with almost 20 gears to be able to compete against the 2-strokes. But we're talking 10, 12 horsepower on these bikes. So it took them a while to get up to speed, and the whole key was maintaining that speed once you got there. This is Ángel Nieto's, this is his Derby, which Derby was a Spanish brand, or still is a Spanish brand. You can see how aerodynamic this is. And one of my favorite things on this bike is this feature right here. Y'all know can you tell what that is? It's a spark plug. Yep. This is, he had these installed on all of his race bikes. But this is because if he fouled a plug during the race, he could pull off, there's an extra spark plug attached to his frame. He has the tool right there. He can replace his spark plug during the race. Pretty cool. Back in the 2-stroke world. So anyway, that is the background behind what would go on to be the Paragon. I'm going to take a quick look at the comments here. If you know Confed Yank says, if you know Mayberry, it's commonly referred to many of towns in North Carolina. There's many of rural areas where it's nice to ride. Richard says, totally badass. I love it. Confed Yank says, that is the real cafe racer. Yeah. What's the story behind the dent in the tank? I actually don't remember what the story was. I do know I had a lot of incidents on that bike, one of which was I got hit by a truck. It sounds worse than it was. It actually was pretty bad. It was intentional. I ended up a couple of yards from the motorcycle. I did a flip. That may have been when the tank got dented. I think it was, actually. Yeah. Luckily, my head did not get dented. So being a biker got you into biking. Well, not it was being I guess you could say a moped gang member got me into biking. Confed Yank says, imagine if someone would channel that creative energy of designing it into making a very artistic motorbike. Imagine. So this is the first very early, I thought this was a cool image, sketches we did of the Paragon. This is in 2D CAD. So if you remember, I've talked about how we used architectural CAD. This is me moonlighting in the evenings after in the architectural studio designing a chassis. I really had no idea how to design a chassis at this point. I do have a lot of pencil and paper sketches as well, but I thought this was a kind of a neat image. And from there, the first thing we needed to do was be able to figure out how to attach the motor. So this is some engine cases. This would be a Puch E50 engine cases. I think that's an E50, yeah. And this is our sheet metal formed engine brackets, which we worked at before mocking it up to the frame. Skipping a couple of steps, but here's the rough tack welded Paragon frame. It's pretty small. It's also not very rigid, so once you get up to speed, it kind of swims a little bit. I learned a lot about rigidity doing this, but it was a fun exercise, and it was, I think it weighed like under 20 pounds. It was very, 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 very light. That's actually, I think that's 3/4 inch tubing. Really small. And there we have the engine mounted, swing arm mounted, forks on the bike, and the cardboard or paper tank and seat mocked up. We were kind of trying to figure it out. This is in the old moped shop before we actually moved into the Janus building, with tons of mopeds in the background. There you can start to see, we really had that tank idea early on. I really wanted to have the knee slots in there to reference that kind of Grand Prize style motorcycle, kind of a Dunstall style tank, and we knew we wanted it to be out of aluminum so that we could polish it and make the seat to match. Mocking up, there's Devin mocking up a Motobecane fender. This was a joke. And there you see the chassis going together. There's the mount plate for the engine with a mock-up engine in there. And we went to great lengths to engineer in the pedal shaft so that this thing would have pedals and be a real moped. There it is on the road with the paper tanks. A very young Richard Worsham. I still have a beat up old pair of Vans, that same color. And there we have the fuel tank, raw tank mocked up. Handlebars. We actually made we made those handlebars. There's the tank. Actually, this is a little out of order. Raw welded on the bike. There's the big old. We put a Mikuni 24 millimeter flat slide carburetor on it with a velocity stack that we made. So we talked about velocity stacks last week. There's your velocity stack that I was talking about. Big aluminum cone. There's the frame, the chassis, and all the associated bits freshly powder coated. Back from the powder coater. Seth Mark says, how bad did that frame come out of square welded? I don't know. It rode pretty true. No idea. It was not. We did not have a jig when we put it together, so I guarantee you it's not true. Howard, hey Howard Spruitt. He says my first bike was an Allstate Puch sold by Sears back in the 50s. Moved up to several Honda 50s. Yes, I've ridden a number of those Allstate Puchs, including the Twingle, the famous Twingle, and a couple of the 50cc singles as well. Lots of people had those. They're really, a lot of people I think wish they still had them. They're really neat bikes. And there we have the bike. The first time we assembled it, we've got the headlight on. That's a classic. I didn't show you, but if you go back to that one of the pictures of those GP bikes, it has the same headlight on it. That's a CEV bullet headlight, which is every moped made in Europe had the same headlight. And we went to great lengths to find that one with a little cowl over the front. Some more. Oh, we wanted a belt down the top of the tank to attach it. Classic racing style. And there it is. With its big old polished stainless steel expansion chamber exhaust. Right outside. If you'll probably recognize that's out behind the shop in the alley. And there it is from the front. It really turned out well. At this point, we had not figured out how to make our own fenders at all. I mean, we didn't even... It would be a long time until we made our own fenders, but we didn't know how we were going to fit any fenders on this narrow tire with this radius. There I am. If you're familiar with the shop, this is right across the door, across the street from the back door. This would have been about 2010, 2011 maybe. And yeah, this is 2000. This is the same year we founded Janus. So by this point, we had realized that we had the makings of something, and we were just idiotic enough that we thought we could start a motorcycle company. And And so we, by this point, were raising funds and contacting the vendors. It was through I should have mentioned, it was through the fabrication of this chassis that we found our fabrication shop. This is where we met some of the people that we still work with today. A lot of the Amish, especially, that we work with today. And maybe some of you all will remember the fact that behind me is the assembly bay. It's now a big open room with beautiful skylights. Back then, there was a wooden loft. It was prior to us, it was used by the police as a holding cell for stolen bicycles. So it has a history of two wheels. And they would put all the bikes up on the loft. They built this kind of cheap loft up there with a ramp going up to it. And we built a little plastic, you can see sort of here on the plastic enclosure where we could host investors. And we had a little cheese platter for our first advisor. And I decided to cut oddly shaped windows in it. And that's where I would do the design work the design and marketing for the newly founded, at that time it was called Paragon Motorcycles. There I am working on the first Janus. And so I don't know if you can see that image, but that's essentially the Paragon frame. And we were still thinking in that realm. We hadn't thought about the featherbed frame and all the things that we would go on to do later on with the Halcyon 50 that would come out. But this is kind of a weird amalgam, this image here. You basically see, what you're seeing is the Paragon with its Pook engine, an 80cc kit. Looks like a giant high tension coil, like a race high tension coil off the frame. The same headlight and a sort of interesting tank and a leather saddle seat and a little bag. And that bag, if you recognize the shape of that bag, that is the same shape that all of our saddlebags still are. So this is where we're starting. Oh, it's got a fishtail exhaust too. You're starting to see the Halcyon idea. I don't think I even realized it at the time, but this is when it was starting to kind of come alive. And this is about, I don't know if some of you all who've been on live streams before will know that I've mentioned the Falcon motorcycle, or what was it called? Was it called Ian Barry and his, what were they called? Was it Falcon motorcycles? Yeah, Falcon. His bikes. This is when I was looking at those motorcycles, and this is when I was being inspired by them to. I think I really will credit Ian Barry and his motorcycles with getting me interested in, instead of this cafe thing. Because I mean, you've got to think. I mean, we were totally engaged with the Grand Prix scene, which is what cafe racers come from. They're private, citizens that are wanting to have a bike that looks like a GP bike, because there were no sport bikes in the 1950s and early 60s. They didn't exist. You couldn't buy a replica. Like today, you can basically have the motorcycle that Valentino Rossi races, complete with all the horsepower. I mean, to an extent, but yeah, this is when there was a major shift in our design. Basically, because I got sidetracked from the idea of a cafe racer Grand Prix style motorcycle to, like you see on this image, this kind of crossover to something that's different. Leather, fishtail exhausts, solo seats. Yeah, definitely a different thing. This is something that, when I was looking through the images, I forgot that we even did this. This is the first engine we looked at for the Janus. This is what is this? This is a Franco Marini, which is an Italian engine. And we first looked at the Franco Marini with its little Kickstarter on there, 50cc, and I think it was sourcing. We couldn't count on the sourcing as well as we could on the engine that we ended up going with, which was the Derby. Much like Aniel Nieto's, that was kind of one of the reasons I think we really liked it, is it was had such a heritage. And basically at this point, I'm getting on past the story of the Paragon. So maybe there might be a couple of studio shots that I'll get to, but we're kind of like crossing over here between the house, the first Halcyon, which uses, there's the Derby engine right there. That's the first one we got on my desk. Taking pictures of it. And by the time we were starting to source those engines, we were finally able to finish up the Paragon. And that's where I'll end it tonight. A couple more shots of the Paragon, but I'll culminate it with the studio shoot of the Paragon. And here it is. There's the front fender we ended up making. And that's all hand-formed aluminum. At that point, we just bent a flat piece and welded it all together. And I think it's really elegant. You can see it if you come into the shop. It's still on there. Really elegant. You can kind of see the polishing marks. It's not perfect, but it's really, it was a fun idea. Oh yeah, and I remember designing that bracket to fit to the forks. There's that headlight I was talking about, and I don't think I have a picture of it, but on the top of the headlight, we had a little, I convinced Devin we needed a little Latin motto. So it says, Nil satis nisi optimum, which means nothing but the best is good enough. That was fun. It has our clip-on handlebars that we made, some vintage headlight brackets, EBR front forks, which are hydraulic, really inexpensive. Well, not inexpensive. They're Italian hydraulic forks, but they're designed for like a moped application, which is perfect. And then we had little temperature and tachometer readings up there. We chopped the levers to fit. And there's your engine and exhaust with a HPI ignition and the carburetor. We kind of paired all the orange together with NOS parts. There's the seat, all hand-formed aluminum. The leather, very low padding seat. That seat was very uncomfortable, but it looked good. And there's our logo. I drew that by hand on my drafting desk, and it's obviously a nod to the Norton logo. With those, that O gives it all away, and the tail on the G. It's fun. As many of you know, Janus Motorcycles, our legal name still is Paragon Motorcycles. There you have it, and there it is. There's the studio shot. I told you that picture of Peter McDaniel, the guy with the Honda PA 50. He did all these photographs. He's a professional photographer and took some lovely pictures of the Paragon. And I think we really captured the lines of the GP Grand Prix motorcycling. And this thing would haul. I mean, I think it was clocked at 75 miles an hour. It did not feel safe at 75 miles an hour, but it was thrilling. With this tiny little, look at the size of that drum brake. Would not stop very fast. And it made a lot of noise with that big old exhaust and that and the velocity stack. It made more carburetor noise than it did exhaust. That's my favorite angle of it. Really looks good. Love that bike. And there we are, kind of like a dorky hero shot, with just showing how small that the Paragon is between us, looking all serious and mean. And that's in the middle of a street in Grand Rapids. We kind of rolled it out there. So I'm going to end it on that note, the slideshow that is, and we'll look at the comments and kind of wind down, and I'll actually be on time this time. Let's see. Confetti says, I'm sort of surprised the infamous belt isn't an option for Janus. Yeah, it could be. We have done a belt on a Phoenix. The Phoenix we did for the hand-built show. I wonder if I could pull that up. Let's see. Yeah, the Phoenix we did for the hand-built show. I probably won't be able to pull it up. Jay, who's our fabrication shop lead, he now has that bike called Blang Blang, as we call it, Blang Blang. But I don't have any pictures of it. handy. I can pull some up, but we'll leave that for another time. We did do a belt on the top, and it's really cool because it has an aluminum piece that goes around because the fuel cap's in the middle. We made an aluminum piece that goes around the fuel cap. It's really fun. Seth says, "Whoa, big man, little scoot." Yeah, seriously. How a 6'6" guy got into these tiny bikes will always puzzle me. Craig says, are there any plans to offer different color options for the powder-coated frames? Good question. You all will probably see something like that soon, I will say, in celebration of the upcoming landmark number of Halcyons being built. I won't say any more. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. It will be on a very limited basis, at least at this time. It will not. For us to do that, it's extremely complicated, and it makes repairs for the bike and replacement parts very difficult. So we will likely let me shift over to my second screen. There we go. We will likely not offer that, at least for the foreseeable future, as a option, unless you were to get a custom limited edition bike, which we're working on something like that. So I'm excited about that. It will likely be considerably more expensive because it's a lot more time consuming. Gary says the loft. Yeah, Gary remembers the loft, right? Do you remember that? I'm sure you do. He says it looked like a college dorm room. It kind of was a college dorm room. It was pretty grody, as they say. Confediank says, seems like a secured place for bikes. Yeah, it was actually. It still is. Pretty good. We've never been robbed. Right next to the police station. Next to the peeling lead paint. I'm doing fine. Charles says, just heard my buddy from Wild Ass Cushions is getting a used Janus. Good stuff. He has his bikes at the rallies he goes to. Wonderful. Glad to hear that. Speaking of buddies and used bikes, we had two of our old moped pals from back before Janus, from the Moped Army, come in for a Discovery Day last Saturday, and we had two used bikes available. They both got a real good deal on some unfactory refurbished. One was a Griffin and one was a Halcyon. Little rough shape, but they were in great deal, and I'm really pleased to see the support. Not only the fact that they're getting a Janus, but just the fact that they're supporting us by doing so. It sounds like they've really been following us, and it was really good to see them. Really fun. And they drove up with a van. I think they were thinking about buying something, and they got too carried away, and they decided they were going to leave the van and ride both of them back. So they had to come back. I think they're from Lafayette, or at least that's where one of them is. So quite a long day, but I think they had a good time. Martin Drew. Hello, Martin. I haven't seen your name in the chat yet. We're glad you stole those bikes back from the police, Richard. Yeah. Carlos. How are you, Carlos? Good to see some different names in here. This is very interesting to learn about the origins of Janus motorcycles. Absolutely. I'm glad you found it interesting. Not too boring. Not too much of a ramble. Confediank says it's handcrafted, though. Yeah. Confediank says, I'll laugh if y'all come out with a race bike called Paragon. You never know. Well, I'm almost done with my beer, and it's 7:57. So what do you say we wrap this up before 8 o'clock? I will be on next Monday. We will be out. So look for another Ramblestream then. I think what we'll probably end up doing is maybe we'll move right on to the origins of the first Janus motorcycle, which actually it's on the wall behind this Isle of Man flag. This Isle of Man flag, it's on the wall behind it, hanging up there. Maybe we'll take a peek at that. And the origins, I have lots of pictures, so I will have to cull them carefully so that we don't have to sit through a horribly long slideshow. But I look forward to sharing that with you all. And we'll do that next week. Confed Yank says, you only interrupted me of shooting a video for chilled vibes. All right. Well, thank you all, as always, for watching. Oh, one thing I will say is, if you haven't, you should like, I hate to say this, sound like like the video, click to subscribe. No, but really, like the video, and it might help us with getting more people on and spread the Janus word. So if you haven't already, consider liking the video and subscribing to the Janus channel. You're obviously all commenting, really appreciate it. And I've, as always, enjoyed hanging out with you all, and we'll look forward to doing so again next Monday at 7 p.m. right here on the YouTube. I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.